It's been 5 months since we saw Ruby Sunday enter the TARDIS for the very first time. What a fitting way to revisit that moment as we embark on a brand new season of Doctor Who. Now, I've only just seen Space Babies. I suppose my thoughts are still congealing. Is that the right word? Never mind. I've no doubt I'll form a more coherent opinion as time goes on, but this video, even though it's more like a review, is my initial reaction to seeing the episode. With that said, there will be spoilers, so please let this serve as a warning if you have yet to see the episode. But without further ado, let's hop aboard the TARDIS with a brand new Doctor and his brand new companion as we go beyond the sofa. So my overall impression of this episode was that something didn't quite feel right. I think I had a sense of that through the whole episode. There are moments of foreshadowing here which should work a lot better than they do. The push the button moments, I can't really put my finger on it, which doesn't help if you're trying to push a button. But instead of it feeling like an integral part of the narrative, it feels like a writer who is winking at the audience, and it just didn't quite work for me. I suppose I would have liked to have seen that phrase cropping up across different scenes throughout the whole of the thing, because as it is, it feels very confined to a bit at the beginning and then forgotten about until we get the payoff at the end. We open with Ruby entering the TARDIS again, and we have the getting to know you scene with the Doctor, which any long-time fan will be well versed with. What's different this time is that they really do go back to basics, presumably for the new Disney audience. I can't fault the episode for that. Sometimes you just need to do what's required for the audience to all be on the same page. We have gone back to that Last of the Time Lords thing, which I'd kind of hoped we'd left behind. We had 4 seasons exploring this, and it all feels kind of like we're treading on old ground again, right at the point where I'm primed for seeing something that's brand new and different. There's a lot to be said about letting this play out across the series a little, which seems to be what they're doing with Ruby. We get a couple of scenes in the episode which call back either to the Christmas special or to the mystery of Ruby herself, and that was done very well. The look of this thing is amazing. Our first major VFX shot back with the dinosaurs looked stunning, and they fixed the title sequence, which was fantastic to see. I really do like the titles, and speaking of which, one of the things that really does sell this episode is the music. It's a real return to form for Murray Gold, and there were various points when I just couldn't stop listening to it. We have the moment that Ruby steps on a butterfly, and we get the Doctor breathing life back into it, which is a nice callback. Well, I suppose to the McCoy era when that was really brought centre stage. And it also really nicely highlights the possible dangers of travelling with the Doctor. Now, as we've seen before, time travel has never quite worked like that. And in this episode, more than others, it feels like we're seeing things through the lens of the Doctor. He's a time sensitive. He would see these changes and we experience them along with him. I like that a lot. I also really love the way that we visualize this TARDIS flying into the space base. It's almost like you've got a Time Lord eyes view of space and time. And that also lets them have some really swish visuals right at the start of the show that pull you in. And you need that because a good chunk of this episode is running down corridors. Not a bad thing, and a staple of Doctor Who storytelling, but the bigger moments where you can play with visuals a little, elevate those smaller, more insular sets, which you do really need for the horror elements to work. It's smart writing and it's smart production. One thing I did want to say about the dialogue, there are a few lines about genocide here, which I'm sure will get picked up on. Clearly, this episode was written well before the recent bouts of troubles in the Middle East, and I don't think that it was written to be political. There are some bits of political commentary in this, but they're kind of subtle. It's not in-your-face politics, but it manages to convey a point if you're open to hear it. And if not, you could easily just skip over this dialogue and not consider the points made. I like this. I used to write political satire, and it's very difficult to get it right. Time and again, the best satire was subtle and constrained and framed within the context of a larger story. And that's what you've got here. You can choose to engage with it or not. And when it does have some more salient issue-based dialogue, it's around who Ruby is, or who the babies are, or who the Doctor is, and each one is a part of the other's story, and that's something that we end up seeing reflected in the Bogeyman as well. There's no doubt that this story is really about orphans, and it starts to explore both the Doctor and Ruby's place within that. I really like that about it. The main story, the talking babies in space, it's a nice little sci-fi idea, and I'm sure some people will have a problem with the lip syncing, but actually I thought they did a really good job there. The only thing that kind of took me out of it a bit was the baby, is it Eddie, who looks permanently like he's got constipation? Never work with children or animals, they say. Anyway, I would have liked to have seen a bit more around how the babies survived on the ship and given them a little bit more agency in their own story. But that would have been difficult considering the fast pace with which this breezes along. There are some wonderful moments between the Doctor and Ruby. Those two, they're going to be special, I can tell. But there was also a sense that the series is finding its feet. There were several moments where I didn't feel Ncuti was the Doctor. But then there are also moments when he was talking to Nanny, for example, when his performance was absolutely spot on. And I suppose I was surprised about that because it's at odds with how I felt about Church on Ruby Road, where I didn't think that he missed a beat. I do wonder whether it was down to some of the dialogue. For me, the comments on "I've travelled the universe," which must have been there to help, new audiences understand the character a little bit more. To me, they made the character feel a little bit less legitimate. I don't think that you need to say them so many times during a single episode. And I suppose you could... Well, look, you can liken it to Morecambe and Wise. The more that Eric tells people how good a writer Ernie is, the less you believe Ernie is a good writer. And then there's those moments, like the bit where Ruby's phone is changed and she calls home, that feel like shadows of the original. We've seen this all before, and somehow it had more of an impact back then. Perhaps that's just because I've been watching the show for 40-odd years, but it's too much old ground to go over again and again. Where am I with this episode then? Well, look, largely I enjoyed it. I liked the plot. It had its silly moments, sure, but they weren't ridiculous. It had several moments where both the Doctor and Ruby got to shine. It is perhaps the difficult first episode of a new era, where so much has to be set up, it can detract from everything else that's happening. But it's saved by moments where the Doctor realises what the monster is made out of, and therefore what Ruby has been covered in. I also really like the flashbacks at the end, seeing the Doctor equating himself with the fate of the Bogeyman and making that decision not to let that stand. That was all really good stuff, even if it didn't quite have the emotional weight that it could have done. Given that it had so much to do, I'm of a mind to forgive this some of its trespasses. I think this will have some rewatch value just for the awkward moments when the Doctor and Ruby are called Mummy and Daddy, or they're running away from the Bogeymans. Those moments where I was just caught up in the narrative, they were lovely. Those are the bits that made me feel like Doctor Who is back. And I do feel that Doctor Who is back. And that's what I think, anyway. And I'd love to know what you think in the comments below. That's it for this video, but why not check out my review of The Devil's Chord, which is also available right now. And I'll see you next time we go Beyond the Sofa.